Eritrean forces have not fully withdrawn from Ethiopia. Disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration, DDR, of the Tigrayan forces is lagging, and the status of contested areas remains unresolved.
Eritrea's President Isaias Afwerki continues to undermine the cessation of hostilities agreement as his troops remain in Ethiopia, troops that have committed massacres, rapes, and other human rights violations and atrocities.
Sanctions, conflict here, conflict there. No. I think we need to strategize. And I say Russia will have to lead this strategy. Russia will have to design a plan on facing this declared war. Not only on Russia, but it's a global war. And everybody should come and join Russia on this strategy.
ሰላም ከመይ ትኾኑ ፍትዋትን ክቡራትን ተኸታተልቲ ትግራይ ብሮድካስት ሰርቪስ ንሰዓት ተዳለዉ ሓድሽ ስናገደስን ሓበሬታታት እንሆ ላይክ ሸር ሰብስክራይብን ኮመንትን ጌርኩም ክትከታተሉና ብምዕዳም ናብ ዝርዝራቶም ክንቅጽል ኣሜሪካ መንግስቲ ኢትዮጵያ ስምምዕ ፕሪቶሪያ ክፈጽም ከም ዘይከኣለ መንግስቲ ኤርትራ ድማ ዓንቃፍ ናይቲ ስምምዕ ኮይኑ ይቕጽል ከም ዘሎ ረጋጊጻ ከም ውጽኢት ድማ ብኢትዮጵያ ተኸተሎ ዘላ ፖሊሲ ዳግማ ምፍታሽ ከም እትርከብ ኣፍሊጣላ ፍሉይ ልኡኽ መንግስቲ ኣሜሪካ ብኢትዮጵያ ማይክ ሃመር ኣብ ኮንግረስ ኣሜሪካ ኮሚቴ ጉዳያት ወፃኢ ኣሜሪካ ቀሪቡ ንፖሊስን ረብሓን ኣሜሪካ ብኢትዮጵያ ዝምልከቶም ኣካላት ተመያይጡሎ ኣብቲ ምይይጥ መብርህ ዝሃበ ማይክ ሃመር ሰራዊት ኤርትራ ካብ ትግራይ ጠቕሊሉ ከም ዘይወፀ ምጥያሽ ናይቲ ብመሰረት ስምምዕ ፕሪቶሪያ ግብኡ ፈጺሙ ዝርከብ ሰራዊት ትግራይ ከም ዝተጓተተ ብመሰረት ሕገ መንግስታዊ መስርሕ ክፍትሑ ኣብ ስምምዕ ዝተበጽሐሎም ከባብታት ትግራይ ከም ዘይተፈትሑ ብንጹር ኣቐሚጡሎ
Eritrean forces have not fully withdrawn from Ethiopia. Disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration, DDR, of the Tigrayan forces is lagging, and the status of contested areas remains unresolved. Therefore, implementation of the COHA remains a work in progress.
ኣብቲ መድረክ ብዛዕባ እቲ ጉዳይ ተሪር ሕቶ ዘቕረበ ኣባል ኮንግረስ ብራድ ሸርማን 1.8 ሚልዮን ህዝቢ ትግራይ ብሓይልታት ኣምሓራ ከም ብሄር ክጠፍእ ገበን ተፈጺሙሉ ካብ ምዕራብ ትግራይ ክባረር ከም ዝተገብረ ብምዝኻር ፈለማቶም ዝተመዛበሉ ወገናት ናብ ዓዶም ዝምለሱሉ መገዲ ክናደይ ይግባእ ከም ዝነበረ ብምሕባር ብምቕጻል እቲ ሕገ መንግስቲ ናይ ትግራይ ምዃኑ ኣፍልጦ ዝሃቦ ምዕራብ ትግራይ ናብ ሕገ መንግስታዊ ቦትኡ ተመሊሱ ብመሰረት ስምምዕ ፕሪቶሪያ መዕለብ ክግበረሉ ዝሓተተ ኮይኑ ነቲ መንግስቲ ኢትዮጵያ መወዳእታ ዝሓለፈ ወርሒ ጥቅምቲ ዘውፅኦ ጉዳይ ምዕራብ ትግራይ ብሪፈረንደም ክንውድኦ ኢና ዝብል መግለጺ ኣብ ልዕሊ ህዝቢ ምዕራብ ትግራይ ዓልየት ናይ ምፍጻም ወፍሪ ኣካይድካ ሪፈረንደም ከካይድ እየ ዝብል መግለጺ ምውፃእ ባጫ ምዃኑ እዩ ኣባል ኮንግረስ ብራድ ሸርማን ገሊጹ ዘሎ
Thank you. Looking at the internally displaced persons, 1.8 million have been displaced. They've been ethnically cleansed from Western Tigray by Amhara forces. The question is, what will we do to accomplish two goals? First, to let people go back to their homes, and then second, to make sure that we resolve the issue of Western Tigray. The Pretoria Agreement says that that's supposed to be according to constitutional means. Constitution seems to say you go with a referendum, but nothing's more phony than a referendum after an ethnic cleansing.
ኣባል ኮንግረስ ብራድ ሸርማን ሕቱኡ ብምቕጻል ነቲ መንግስቲ ኢትዮጵያ ዘፈጽሞ ዘሎ ሸፈጥ ንምዕጋት እንታይ ክንገብር ኣለና ክብል ዝሓተተ ኮይኑ ብፍላይ ወግሐ ፀብሐ ዶላር ሃብኒ እናበለ ማዕጾታት ትካላት ፋይናንስ ዓለም ዝኩሕኩሕ ዘሎ ስርዓት ኣብይ ኣሕመድ ስምምዓቱ ዘይፈጽም እንተኮይኑ ከም በዓል ትካል ገንዘብ ዓለም IMF ዝበሉ ዳግመ ግምት ክግበረሎም ገንዘብ ዝሓትት እንተኮይኑ ዝተመዛበለ ህዝቢ ምዕራብ ትግራይ ናብ መረበቱ ክምለስ ብድሕሪ እዚ ተመዛቢሉ ዝጸንሐ ህዝቢ ሩፍታም ስረኸበ ድማ ሪፈረንደም ዝካየደሉ መገዲ ክህልሎ ክብል እዩ ተላብዩ ዘሎ
So, what, Ambassador, can we do with AGOA and the IMF to press Ethiopia to allow Tigrayans to return to Western Tigray and to make sure that a resolution occurs that isn't a phony referendum?
ፍሉይ ልኡኽ መንግስቲ ኣሜሪካ ብኢትዮጵያ ማይክ ሃመር ኣብ ዝሃቦ መብርህ ድማ ናብ መቐለን ተመዛበልቲ ናብ ዝርከብሎም ከባብታትን ተመላሊሱ ዝረኣዮ መከራ ዘሰንብድ ምዃኑ ብምግላጽ ሓሳብ ብራድ ሸርማን እውን ቅቡል ከም ዝኾነ ብምእማን ጉዳይ ምዕራብ ትግራይ ኣብ ሕገ መንግስታዊ ቦትኡ ኣብ ትግራይ ኮይኑ ፖለቲካዊ ዘተ ክጅመር ተመዛበልቲ ብህፁፅ ናብ ዓዶም ክምለሱ ብትዕግስቲ ንጽበለና ብምባል ቅድሚ ኩሉ ግን ናይቶም ናብ ዓዶም ዝምለሱ ወገናት ጸጥታዊ ውሕስነት ውሑስ ክኸውን ምዕራብ ትግራይ ውሕስነቱ ክረጋገጽ ቀዳማይ ጉዳይ ምዃኑ እዩ ተዛሪቡ ዘሎ።
Thank you very much for the question. As you probably know, I have visited Mekelle, I've visited an IDP camp, and I've seen the horrific circumstances under which those Tigrayans are living and their urgent need to return back to their homes. As you accurately pointed out in the cessation hostilities agreement, it is meant that the disputed areas be resolved within the Constitution as well as through political dialogue, and that is ongoing. We're all impatient. We all recognize the urgent need for internally displaced people to be able to return to their homes and live in security. We are continuously assured that security will come to Western Tigray.
If I can...
ዘረባኻ ብልዓሊ ይኩን ብምባል ኣብ መብርሂ ማይክ ሃመር ተወሳኺ ሕቶ ዘቕርብ ኣባል ኮንግረስ ብራድ ሸርማን ኣብ ምዕራብ ትግራይ ዘሎ ኩነታት እስከረድአኒ ምዕራብ ትግራይ ሕዚ ጥሩሕ ድዩ ዘሎ ወይስ ካልኦት ሰባት ሰፊሮሞ እዮም እንታይ እዩ ዝፍጸም ዘሎ ብምባል ይሓቶ።
If I can interrupt, yes. We've had all these people displaced from Western Tigray. Have other people from outside Western Tigray moved in, or is land lying fallow? What is happening in Western Tigray?
ሸፈጥን ዲፕሎማሲያዊ ላዛን ዝተመልኦ ኣግባብ መልሲ ዝህብ ኣምባሳደር ማይክ ሃመር ብወገኑ ርግጽኛ ይኮንኩን ናብ ምዕራብ ትግራይ ወኪላትና ሰዲድና ከይንዕዘብ ናይ ጸጥታ ኩነታት ስለ ዘስክእና መንግስቲ እውን ስለ ዘይፈቀደልና ናብ ምዕራብ ትግራይ በኣካል ከይድና ረጋጊጽና ዝረአናዮ ነገር የለን ኢሉ ኣሎ። ወሲኹ ድማ እቲ ከባቢ ኣዝዩ ሓደገኛ እዩ ካብ ኤምባሲ ኣሜሪካ በአዲስ ኣበባ ኾነ ካብ ትካል ረድኤት ኣሜሪካ USAID ናብቲ ከባቢ ንሰራሕተኛታትና ምውፋር ኣዝዩ ክንጥንቀቕ ኣለና። እቲ ዋና ቆላሕታና ግና ተመዛበልቲ ካብ ዘለውዎ ቦታ ናብ ገዝኦም
Unfortunately, it's difficult for us to know exactly what is happening because of the security situation. There are no impediments from the government for us to travel into Walkite/Western Tigray, but given the security situation, it is extremely dangerous, and we have to be very careful about deploying our personnel from the embassy, from USAID into that area. So we don't have perfect clarity, so I don't want to misspeak. But again, what we're very much focused on is making sure that internally displaced people, wherever they might be, are able to return to their homes as soon as possible.
ነዚ ሸፈጥ ዝተመልኦ ዘረባ ናይቲ ኣምባሳደር ተመልኪቶም ኣብ ማሕበራዊ መራኸብታት ርእይቶም ዘካፍሉ ዘለዉ ተጋሩ እሞ ንስኻ ሙሉእ ሓለዋ ዝግበረልካ ወዲ ሓያል ሃገር ኣሜሪካ ብፀጥታ ምክንያት ናብ ምዕራብ ትግራይ ከይድካ ኩነታት ምዕዛብ እንተዘይክኢልካ ሪፈረንደም ይቕረሞ ከመይ ኢሎም እዮም እቶም ተመዛበልቲ ናብ ቦታኦም ክምለሱ ዝብል ሕቶ ከቕርቡ ተራእዮም ኣለዉ። ኣባል ኮንግረስ ብራድ ሸርማን ሕቱ ያቋረፅን ንማይክ ሃመር ወጢሩ ዝሓዞ ይመስል ነቲ መብርሂ ምስ ሰምዐ ኣብ ዘቕረቦ ተወሳኺ ሕቶ ብዝተኽኣለ መጠን ቀልጢፉ መንግስቲ ኢትዮጵያ ስምምዕ ፕሪቶሪያ ከተግብር እንተዘይክኢሉ ካብ ትካል ገንዘብ ዓለም IMF ልቓሕ ከይረክብ ምኽልካል እዩ ዝግባእ። እቲ ዝዓበየ ጸቕጢ ልቓሕ IMF ምእጋድ እዩ። ከምኡ ክንገብር ድልዋት ኢና ነቲ መንግስቲ ብቋዋሚ ካብቲ ልቓሕ ክንእግዶ ዘኽእል ጽልዋኸ ኣብ ውሽጢ IMF ኣለና ድዩ በዘቢልና ከነቲ ስምምዕ ከነፈጽሞ ንኽእል ዶ ክብል ይሓትት።
If the Ethiopian government on this issue and other important issues doesn't adhere to the Pretoria Agreement, our biggest pressure point is to prevent IMF lending to Ethiopia. Are we prepared to do that, and do we have the clout inside the IMF to do it? Not with the goal of permanently preventing the IMF lending, but with the goal of getting Ethiopia to adhere to the agreement.
ፍሉይ ልኡኽ መንግስቲ ኣሜሪካ ብኢትዮጵያ ማይክ ሃመር ነዚ ሕቶ ክምልስ ከሎ ግን ኣሜሪካ ንኢትዮጵያ ኣብ IMF ገንዘብ ከይትረክብ ብምኽልካል ነቲ ስምምዕ ክተተግብር ከም ዘይተገድዳ እዩ ዝዛረብ። ምስ ሓለፍቲ ትካል ገንዘብ ዓለም ዘለዎ ምርዳእ ናይ ኢትዮጵያ ቁጠባ ከይወድቕ ህዝቢ ኢትዮጵያ እውን ከይጽገም ከምኡውን ርክብ ኣሜሪካን ኢትዮጵያን ብዘይጎድእ መልክዑ ክኸይድ እቲ ልቓሕ ቁጠባዊ ትካላት ኢትዮጵያ ናብ ውልቀ ዋንነት ኣብ ምዝዋር ዝብል ፖሊሲ ዝተደረኸ ክኸውን በዚ መልክዑ ክፍጸም ከም ዝወሃብ እዩ ተገሊጹ ዘሎ።
I appreciate the question, and frankly, our engagement with the IMF is very much focused on trying to ensure that there's not a collapse of the Ethiopian economy, which would certainly not be in America's interest and the Ethiopian people's interest. and the engagement of the IMF, and I'll defer, of course, to my Treasury colleagues, is important to try to bring about economic reforms, privatization that will help all Ethiopians.
ኣባል ኮንግረስ ብራድ ሸርማን ንፍሉይ ልኡኽ መንግስቲ ኣሜሪካ ብኢትዮጵያ ማይክ ሃመር ኣብ ዘቕረበሎ ለዋ ምፍጻም ስምምዕ ፕሪቶርያን ምርጋጽ ውሕስነት ምዕራብ ትግራይን ልዑል ቆላሕታ ከም ዘድልዮም ብምዝኻር ልክዕ ከምቲ ቅድሚ ሕዚ ኩናት ትግራይ ንምህዳእ መንግስቲ ኣሜሪካ ልቓሕ ትካል ገንዘብ ዓለም IMF ብምእጋድ ዝገበሮ ጸቕጢ ከምኡ እውን ብስንኪ ስርቂ ረድኤት ነቲ ቀረብ ከልኪሉ ፍታሕ ከምጽእ ዝገበሮ ምንቅስቓስ ሕዚ እውን እቲ ስምምዕ ክፍጸም ልዑል ግደ ከም ዘለዎ ብምዝኻር እዚ መንግስቲ ኢትዮጵያ ናትካ ጸቕጢ ዘድልዮ መንግስቲ እዩ ምስ በሎ ክልቲኦም ብስምምዕ ነቲ መድረኽ ክዓጽውዎ ተረኣዮም እዮም።
I would hope that in addition to those reforms, that a resolution on Western Tigray and the implementation of the Pretoria Agreement is at the very highest level, that major IMF loans are not approved until we get Ethiopia on the right track there. And we're dealing with a government that interrupted USAID, first allowed the theft, and then second interrupted the aid by not allowing us until, I guess, next month to have the kind of controls that we have elsewhere in the world. So this is a government that needs your pressure, and I'm sure you'll do it. It's a difficult job. I'm glad we have you there doing it.
With that, I can agree.
Thank you.
ብተዛማዳ ሓበሬታ ኣብቲ ባይቶ ኣሜሪካ ኮሚቴ ጉዳያት ወጻኢ ዘካየዶ ፖሊሲ ኣሜሪካ ኣብ ኢትዮጵያ መጽባዕታት ዶ ወይ ሓደጋታት ዝተሰመየ ገምጋም ፖሊሲ ኣሜሪካ ንኽፈት መደረ ዘስምዐ ኣቦ ወንበር ናይቲ ኮሚቴ ጆን ጀምስ ብዛዕባ ህሉ ኩነታት ኢትዮጵያን ስክፍታን ኣንፈታቱን ኣመልኪቱ ገሊጹ ኣሎ። ኣብ ኢትዮጵያ ዘሎ ናይ መሪሕነት ትኽመ ዝወለዱ ሕልኽልኻት ኣንፈት ፖሊሲ ኣሜሪካ ፈተና ከም ዝኾነ ዝገልጽ ኣቦ ወንበር ናይቲ ኮሚቴ ጆን ጀምስ ውሽጣዊ ምፍሳስ ደም ዓለም ለኻዊ ጸቕጥታት ንጉዕዞ ናይቲ ሃገር ብድሆ ኮይኑ ከም ዝቐጸለ ብፍላይ ኣብ ትግራይ ዝተኻየደ ኩናት ኣብዚ እዋን ኣብ ኦሮምያን ኣምሓራን ዝቕጽል ዘሎ ጎንፂ ተደሚርዎ ኢትዮጵያ ናይ ህልውና ሕቶ ክትብል ትገልጾ ዘላ ጉዳይ ቀይሕ ባሕርን ንምንማን ኣብ ኢትዮጵያ ክምዕብል ተስፋ ተገይሩሉ ዝነበረ ባህል ዲሞክራስን ተደማሚሮም ሕብረተሰብ ኢትዮጵያ ክመቓቐልን ሓድሕዱ ክትጠራጠርን ስለ ዝገበርዎ ንህላወን ንቁጣውን ፖለቲካውን ምርጋእ ናይቲ ሃገርን መሰረታዊ ሕቶታት ዘበግሱ ዘለዉ ጉዳያት ምዃኖም እዩ ኣረዲኡ ዘሎ።
I'm very concerned about Ethiopia's current trajectory and the direction of our policy. Recent challenges by leadership in Ethiopia, and challenges including greater conflict in the region and global economic shocks, have clouded Ethiopia's journey. In particular, the war in Tigray, current conflicts in Amhara and Oromia, direct comments regarding Ethiopia's so-called existential right to port access, and an increasing posture away from the United States has eroded some of the optimism in Ethiopia's democratic future and raised fundamental questions about Ethiopia's economic and long-term political stability. These conflicts and their aftershocks have exposed the deep divisions present in Ethiopian society.
ኣብቲ ባይቶ ኣሜሪካ ኮሚቴ ጉዳያት ወጻኢ ዘካየዶ ፖሊሲ ኣሜሪካ ብኢትዮጵያ መጽባዕታት ዶ ወይ ሓደጋታት ዝተሰመየ ገምጋም ፖሊሲ ኣሜሪካ መኽፈቲ መደረ ዘስምዐ ኣቦ ወንበር ናይቲ ኮሚቴ ጆን ጀምስ ብዛዕባ ህሉ ስክፍታ ኢትዮጵያ ኣመልኪቱ ኣብ ዝሃቦ ሓሳብ ይቕጽል። ሰራዊት ኤርትራ ነፃ ውዒ ሰላም ረጊጹ ሕዚ እውን ኣብ ትግራይ ማለት ኣብ ኢትዮጵያ ዘቐጽሎ ዘሎ ወራርን ዝፍጽሞ ዘሎ ጭካነ ዝተመልኦ ግፍዕታትን ሓደ ካብቲ ንህላው ኢትዮጵያ ብሓደጋ ዘውደቐ ምዃኑ እዩ ዝገልጾም።
Eritrea's President Isaias Afwerki continues to undermine the cessation of hostilities agreement as his troops remain in Ethiopia, troops that have committed massacres, rapes, and other human rights violations and atrocities.
ጽዑቕ ቁጠባዊ ምትእስሳር ቻይናን ዩናይትድ ዓረብ ኤሚሬትስን ምስ ኢትዮጵያ ንጸጥታ ናይቲ ከባቢ ናብ ሓደጋ እትወ ከም ዘለዎ ብምግላጽ ብፍላይ እታ ኣብ ኩናት ትግራይ ነዊሕ ኢድ ዝነበራ ዩናይትድ ዓረብ ኤሚሬትስ ናብ ኢትዮጵያ ትግዕዞ ዘላ መቕለያ ዘይብሉ ኣጽዋርን ዝግበር ዘሎ ናይ ኣጽዋር ንሕንሕን ኣብ ቀረባ እዋን ድማ ኢትዮጵያ ናብ ብሪክስ ተዓደመተሉ መድረኽ ብሓደ ወገን ብኻልእ ወገን ከዓ እታ ሃገር ተካይዶ ዘላ ቁጠባዊ ቃልሲ ዝቕባበ ዋጋ ሕፅረት ሸርፊ ወጻኢ ስእነት ልቓሕ ተደማሚሩ ልዕሊ $30 ቢልዮን ናይ ወጻኢ ዕዳ ምስካማ ምስታ ሃገር ታንጾ ዘላ ግድብ ህዳሴን ካልእ ነመልኪቱ ፖሊሲ ኣሜሪካ ኣብ ኢትዮጵያ ክፍተሽ እቲ መድረኽ ንሕቶታት ክፍቱ ከም ዝኾነ እዩ ኣመልኪቱ ዘሎ።
Meanwhile, countries like China and the United Arab Emirates have established extensive economic ties with Ethiopia, ties that increasingly are moving into political and security space. Reports widely indicate that weapon systems provided by the UAE, among others, were a decisive factor in the Tigray conflict, and appears that Ethiopia is leading an increasingly rapid regional arms race. Additionally, Just 3 months ago, the government of Ethiopia accepted an invitation into the BRICS country grouping. Economically, Ethiopia is struggling with unchecked inflation, a severe foreign currency shortage, and a sinking credit rating. Without support from international financial institutions, it's expected that Ethiopia is at risk of defaulting on its nearly $30 billion of external debt.
ወሲኹ ድማ ድሕሪ ነቲ ናይ 21 ክፍለ ዘመን እቲ ዝኸፍአን ጭካንን ዝመልኦን ደማዊ ኩናት ኢሉ ዝገለጾ ጆኖሳይዳዊ ኩናት ትግራይ ንምብቃዕ ዝተፈረመን ዓመቱ ዝሓለፈ ስምምዕ ፕሪቶሪያን ከም ዘይተፈጸመ ዘዘኻኽር ኣቦ ወንበር ናይቲ ኮሚቴ ጆን ጀምስ ዓመት ሓሳስ ናብ ኣሜሪካ ዝተዓደመ ቀዳማይ ሚኒስትር ኢትዮጵያ አብይ አሕመድ ዝኣተወ ቃል ከም ዘይፈጸመ እዩ ዝምስክር ሓቅን ምዝራብ ኣየነወት መጽዋዕታት እዮም ተፈጺሞም ብምባል ከዓ ፖሊሲ መንግስቲ ኣሜሪካ ኣብ ኢትዮጵያ ሕቶ ከም ዘሎ ይገሊጹ ዘሎ
Implementation of the cessation of hostilities agreement in Tigray remains incomplete, and no justice have been served for those brutalized by what some have called the deadliest conflict in the 21st century so far. Last December, just 1 month after the cessation of hostility agreement was signed, and 11 months after Ethiopia's AGOA eligibility was rescinded for gross violations of human rights, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was invited to Washington, D.C. to attend the Africa Leaders Summit. The hearing title is about the promise and the peril of U.S. policy toward Ethiopia. And if I'm being honest, it's increasingly difficult to see where the promise lies.
ፕሬዚደንት ኢሳያስ አፈወርቂ ሩስያ ኣብ እትመርሖ ኩናት ተሳታፊ ከም ዝኸውን ኣብቲ ናይ ዝሓለፈ እዋን ኣብ ሩስያ ዝነበሮ ርክብ ምስ ቭላድሚር ፑቲን ከም ዝተዛረበ ኣይርሳዕን
Imagine this tiny Eritrea is being contained by them. We're being punished with their sanctions. Every time we have to be punished because we're not bowing. We are not bound to their conditionality. We are a very small threat. We are not even a threat to them. But they have to contain us. Sanctions, 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 conflict here, conflict there. Now, I think we need to strategize. And I say Russia will have to lead this strategy. Russia will have to design a plan on facing this declared war.
ኣሜሪካ ብወገና ምርጋ ኢትዮጵያ ንህዝብ ናይ ዞባን ንስትራቴጂካዊ ምሕዝነታን ጠቃሚ ምዃኑ ብምግላጽ ኣብዞም ዝሓለፉ 5 ዓመታት ካብ መንግስቲ ኢትዮጵያ ወጽኡ ዘይፈልጥ ቃል ወይ ሓሳብ ብምጥቃም ስርዓት ኤርትራ ምትኹታኽ ብምቕጻል ዓለቕቲ ሰላም ኢትዮጵያ ኮይኑ ይቕጽል ከም ዘሎ እዩ ኣብቲ ናይ ሕዚ ንፖሊሲ ዝፍትሽ መድረኻ ገሊጻቶ ዘላ
Eritrea's President Isaias Afwerki continues to undermine the cessation of hostilities agreement as his troops remain in Ethiopia, troops that have committed massacres, rapes, and other human rights violations and atrocities. A stable Ethiopia is good for the Horn of Africa and important to broader strategic U.S. interests in the region. However, I'm very concerned about Ethiopia's current trajectory and the direction of our policy.
ክቡራት ተኸታተልቲ ትግራይ ብሮድካስት ሰርቪስ ንዝተዓተዳለዉ ሓደሽትን ኣገደስትን ሓበሬታታት እዚኦም ይመስሉ ላይክ ሸር ሰብስክራይብን ኮመንትን ጌርኩም ስለትከታተሉና ኣዝዩና ነመስግን